Greetings, it's Chris Doran and another DBMM Army Review. This time we're in classical mythology. We are looking at the Minoan Army, Book 1, number 18, so 1500 BC. Famous history, based in Crete, the palace of Knossos, one of the most advanced European civilizations of the time, trade routes across the Mediterranean. However, they were destroyed by the Sea Peoples and the Bronze Age collapse. We might be looking at the Sea Peoples another week. It's not the most competitive army, but it's very fun to play and very classic history. So what's good about it? It's got some really interesting, unique troop types. So for example, a mix of Pike X and Pike I gives it very tough, heavy infantry. It gives it some really good Siloi, regular Siloi that can handle difficult, that can also support the Pike. And it's got Knight F for counter-attack potential. Very regular army, a lot of tactical flexibility, and big ME as well that makes it tough to break. On the downside, it tends, because you've got to deploy the pikes deep, it tends to be pretty narrow, and that means it can be outflanked. You might need to echelon the pikes, but pikes are very good for echelon because they got such high base factors, so that they can survive a little bit of overlap. You've got very limited troop types. You've got a very short list. This isn't like the Seleucid army where you can have any toys that you want. You've got a very limited toolkit. And the strategic mobility is not great, since we've got to rely on the heavy infantry for our staying power, and if armies want, they can just avoid the pike, and therefore not that easy to force a win. So we're going to win in general with the matchups, with the quick kill from the knight and the grind from the high factor pikes in order to win. So let's have a look at our list. So Book 1, number 18, the time period 1500 BC to 1250 BC. So right in the classical Bronze Age. It is a small list. You've got very limited types and not many things that you can choose. There's no change over time and no allies, so you've really got a very straightforward choices. Look at the minimums. We've got a minimum of 16 in the pikes, and they can be up to half Pike I, the rest are Pike X, and we have at least 4 chariots. They can either be the regular Knight F or the regular CVO versions. We've also got a few Siloi I, Siloi O that we have to take, and I would add to that compulsory minimum, I would consider core to these troops also the Siloi O, regular Siloi O that can support the pikes. I'll take as many of those as I can get, very cost effective troops. And also I think the Libyan's irregular Siloi I at one point are one of the best values in the game, so I'll take as many of those as I can get. You've got a few other options, regular auxiliary I, irregular bow I, but those are not that strong compared to the core troops. So let's see how we turn that into a list. So when we look at my army list, you'll see there's an aggression of 2. That means we have to be prepared for terrain. In general, this army doesn't do well in terrain. The chariots and the pike need open ground, but on the other hand, we've got a lot of Siloi, so we can cope with them difficult. Very high ME for this army, 106. That makes it a very tough army, hard to break, and that puts it on a par with some of the toughest armies in Book 1. How have we split those across commands? We've got 2 big commands, equal at 40 ME. That's our main fighting command that will do the bulk of the attrition, and a reserve command, pip dump, at command C on 20.5 ME. When we look at those individual commands, the 2 big commands are identical. and the bulk of them is formed by the core heavy infantry with an equal mix of Pike X, Pike I, and Siloi O. So 12 of each in each of those two commands. That gives you a lot of flexibility around formations, as we'll see. Also, we have the three Knight F chariots, of which one's the general in each group. That enables you to have a killing general with 2 wings, enough to counterattack anything that penetrates the pikes, and a dangerous reserve force on each command. We also have the reserve of the overall command, which is Command C, where we've again got a killing set of 3 Knight F to be able to come in and deliver a critical charge at any point of the line. And in addition to that, we've got a large mass of Siloi that can either hold difficult ground or just provide backup in depth to the main line. So our classic formation, we've got a left wing and a right wing up front, and then a reserve behind. In terms of terrain, as I said, we don't like particularly rough terrain. We can handle some difficult because of our huge numbers of Siloi. We've got over 40 in total, which is very impressive even for a Book 1 army. So the best way to use that is with half FE difficults. That will break up the line and enable us to capture them and flank, and the gaps between them can be held very solidly by our pikes and knights. So half FE difficult, creating a very broken battlefield where we can exploit the terrain and exploit the gaps. So this is Command A. It is one of the 2 upfront commands with a reserve command behind, Command C. This command is set up to repel mounted in breadth rather than depth. So it's got 3 deep set up on a wide frontage of 12 elements. This command is deployed for broad anti-mounted formation. So there is Pike X in the first rank, there is Pike I in the second rank, and then there is the Siloi supporting behind. So very effective formation against mounted. Against knights, which are the biggest threat, they will count as a base 4 plus 1 for the second rank, plus 1 for the Siloi, so they will count as a 6 against knights. So that should give definitely Knight F a hard time, and will also give pause to any other types of knight charging in. Against mounted, they are nearly as strong. So they are a 5 and counting S against CV, or light horse because of the front rank plus the Siloi support. So a factor of 6 against knights and 5 with S against CV or light horse. This is unlikely that mounted will be able to break through this line, and very cost effective at only 9 points for that level of toughness. Pike X are a very interesting troop type and unique, and form the backbone of this Minoan army. They count as superior against shooting and in close combat against CV and light horse, Siloi, auxiliary and bow. So therefore they're excellent troops at taking on a bow line. They won't take casualties on the way in because their base factor is 3 plus 1 for S, so they'll be at a factor of 4 against the shooting. And then once they hit with their 3 ranks and S, they will clean up the bows very quickly. They are also very good for holding a line against CV. Even on their own, they're at a factor of 4 and they count as S, so they're as good as Blade S at holding a line against cavalry or light horse. They're pretty immune to Siloi because they count as S, so they will spend any enemy Siloi that go up against them very quickly, and good at charging into an auxiliary line. They will beat even auxiliary S going head to head with their 3 ranks. So very good troops against lots of the types that you will meet in the book 1. So the only vulnerability would be against Blade, when they still have their factor of 5, but they don't get the 4th rank support, so they won't be able to kill very many Blade when they go up against them. So very good troops, very lots of different ways of deploying them, and tough to kill. Also, you can take advantage of the Siloi support that the Minoans get in order to set up even stronger formations for the Minoans. Pike Eye are very good value at only 3 points. They count as 1 ME, so that's one of the reasons why the Minoans have such a large ME for this army. They get their 4th rank, so they will count as 7 when they are charging in, and with that attack of 7 it doesn't really matter that they are I, because they will very rarely be doubled. Counting on 5 on defense, again the I doesn't matter so much. The one area where you'll have to watch them as I is against Siloi, where the I will cause them to die very fast as pikemen, and also if they are going up against bows, where the I will again cause them to die fast. But if you avoid bows and you avoid Siloi, then they are very effective and cost-effective troops. Here they're deployed in 4 ranks to take advantage of the +2 that the 4th rank will give them. If you put Pike X at the front, then they absorb the bow fire and they protect them against Siloi. However, they won't get the 4th rank. So if you're not going up against those tricky troop types, then you may well not want to have Pike X in the front rank, and all 4 as Pike I. Command B is identical to Command A. This has a different setup. It has the pikes set up 4 deep with 2 pike X in the front and 2 pike I behind. If you're going to attack with the pike, then this is a more robust setup that can handle a few casualties. You still don't get the 4th rank. You would have to separate the pike X from the pike I in order to get the 4th rank from the pike I. But it's a pretty robust factor of 5 against foot, and would count as X against auxiliary, Siloi or bow, although it'll count as I against heavy infantry. The Siloi are here not deployed supporting the pike, they're deployed to one side. A group of 12 regular Siloi would be able to fight through a difficult terrain, since they're pretty efficient for pips in difficult terrain, unlike irregular Siloi. So that would enable it to secure flank and create flanking threats against the enemy. All 3 commands have Knight F in them, so the general in the center taking advantage of the lethal general, and then flanked by 2 other Knight F. All are regular, so they are very flexible and maneuverable and punch very hard. However, they die quickly, so don't use them in the front line. Use them to counterattack against any breakthroughs that come from enemies breaching the spearman line, and they are an excellent reserve for the entire line. This army list maxes out on the regular Siloi. You can have 1 for every 2 pikemen, and we have used those to the maximum because they are so flexible. They can be used on their own. They can be used to support the spearmen to make them very strong against mounted, and they can also be used in difficult terrain because they are regular. So they are very flexible troops and excellent value for this list. Command C is the pip dump command that is set up in reserve. The formation here is with Siloi O in the second rank. That will provide support to the Siloi I front rank against other light troops. And the Siloi deployed in depth, they die very fast, but if you send them in against enemy foot, then they will only get spent and will hold the line for long enough for you to win elsewhere. Siloi I deployed deep are one of the best values in the game for holding an enemy foot. And also you've got the 3 knights as the strike force to counter-attack and support the front line in any way. And of course, as Minoans, our baggage has to include our Minotaur statue in bronze. This is a Reaper miniatures figure repurposed in order to have a substantial baggage inspiring the rest of the army. Siloi I are one of the best bargains in the game. They are only 1 point and they can attack a flank and protect a flank and hold up enemy troops exactly the same way as points that are much more expensive, especially deployed in depth against foot. They will last for a long time. When they die, they're only spent, and they will hold up troops that are far more points cost than themselves for many rounds, while boosting your ME total. So very cost effective, and I would buy as many of them as I am allowed. So that's my preferred list with the Minoans. Gives you lots of flexibility and ability to cope with different enemies, but it's not the only way you can configure the list. The biggest change to the list that would completely change the nature of the army is with having a lot of knights. So you can have up to 18 Knight F in chariots, and that will be adding 12, so that's going to be an additional 120 points it would cost to have the 18 knights. To do that, you'd have to get rid of more than half of the pikes. So you'd get rid of 28 pikes, 14 Siloi, to really bring it down to 1 small pike phalanx. And then you'd have 2 strong knight commands that would do the damage. Problem is that Knight Fs are a bit fragile. They die very quickly. Regular are better because they won't get themselves into such difficult circumstances with impetuous charges, but still they're going to die fast. But against some enemies it could be much better to have the Knight fast and a much smaller pike command. For example, against a warband army where the pikes might be vulnerable, against a blade army where again the pikes might be vulnerable. Then we have a look at other options. You can swap the CV, the Knight F, and make them CVO instead. However, you can't mix them, unfortunately. You've got to pick one or the other. So ideally we would like to mix them, but we've really got to go one or the other. The Knight F have much higher strike power. The CVO would only be relevant if we were up against an army that was very good at taking out Knight F, for example a light horse army, but there aren't many of those in book 1. Our third option is to change the mix between Pike X and Pike I. We can have it all Pike X if we want. That would make sense if we were going up against an army that had no heavy infantry, so no need for the 4th rank bonus from the Pike I. So for example, if we're going up against an army that's mostly mounted or auxiliary, Siloi, bow, then it might be worth weighting the Pike X rather than the Pike I. So those are our 3 main alternatives: a very Knight F heavy army, a switching the Knight Fs to CVO, and the third option changing the mix to make it all Pike X rather than balanced Pike X and Pike I. So that's the Minoans. Fun to play rather than the most competitive army. You've got an interesting mix of troop types that perhaps can be tough to win because the enemy will avoid your pikes, but equally it's very hard to break that army, very tough. And you've got the Minotaur as well, so what's not to like? And you've got tough and unusual Pike X to play, and the combination with the Knights is interesting too. So let me know what you think. Give me your comments on your preferred Minoan list, and also comment what should be the next army that I review, and subscribe so that I can notify you on any future army reviews.